Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Macedo. You've been watching officials in New York and previously officials in New Jersey providing an update on the storm damage from remnants of Ida. New York Governor Kathy Hochul is now stressing that New York streets are vulnerable to rising floodwaters. She says we've never seen flooding like this before, but we should expect to going forward. And she's calling on improving draining systems and other infrastructure improvements to do that. Currently, subway and rail systems are still not fully functioning, but Hochul says President Biden has offered the state of New York any assistance needed, and Governor Hochul says she will take him up on that. The governor is also promising assistance to families and businesses affected throughout the state of New York. Meanwhile, New Jersey's Governor Phil Murphy says he is requesting a major disaster declaration for his state. He says residents and businesses have been severely impacted, so many just getting back on their feet from the pandemic. New Jersey Transit is still, the governor says, quote, a work in progress, both for trains and buses, and the same goes for road closures. I want to bring in, we're going to go to Dan Lieberman for a quick debrief. We'll be right there. Dan?
Here in New York City's Central Park, floods last night have stranded vehicles over here. This is typically a very busy road that connects New York City's east and west side, but cars were brought to a standstill as many inches of rain, 3.15 inches of rain in just 1 hour last night, caused these vehicles to start to flood. This man here, Hadi, his vehicle was stranded. You can see inside, Hadi, water brought up near to the top of the car, leaves on your steering wheel. Your car potentially not salvageable at this point, right, Hadi?
Not at all. Happened last night after I dropped in my resume, looking for a job. I come here, I thought maybe it's have an accident. Then suddenly water was coming up and up. Next door cars come on and knock my door to survive his child. I said, as you can see, I opened the door. I said, suddenly lots of water come up to my knees. I said, as you can see, my car is flooding too. I cannot help. At least go other side so somebody can help you. And I'm trying to call 911, also no connection, nothing.
And Hadi's been waiting since 7 a.m. this morning for a tow truck. There's no police here. There's no tow trucks here. These cars are just stranded. It's a sign of just how overwhelmed officials are in the aftermath of this storm with record flooding. Tragically, we've heard about at least 14 people who lost their lives between New York and New Jersey. Diane?
All right, that's WABC's Dan Lieberman in Central Park. Thank you for that, Dan. And let's bring in New Jersey's Gloucester County Administrator Chad Brunner for more on this. Chad, thanks for being here. I know it's a busy time for you. Tell me, what's it like there in Gloucester County right now?
It's a lot of work being done. The residents are concerned. I was out speaking to them earlier today in the towns of Winona and Mantua and Harrison. We have a lot of crews on the ground. There's a lot of down wires, trees, poles. But everybody's working really hard to get the roads cleared and hopefully residents some power back, but it could be days.
So how long do you think it'll take? I mean, you're talking days for immediate recovery. How long do you think it'll take for long-term recovery from this damage?
It could be weeks. I mean, there's a lot of property damage that we've seen. We have our drones in the air. We have the state police helicopter taking footage. Tens and tens of millions of dollars of damage of property. Fortunately, there was no loss of life or many injuries, which is a positive. But it could take weeks and months working with FEMA for reimbursements and insurance and those types of things.
Glad to hear no loss of life in your county. Unfortunately, not the case for the state. We know of a few deaths in New Jersey already, 5 in Elizabeth, New Jersey alone, and we just heard from the New York police chief saying they have found yet another person dead in the state of New York. How surprised are you by how quickly this storm came in, how quickly these waters came in, and in some cases, how quickly they went out? We're seeing areas that had waist-high water just hours ago, and the water is now nowhere to be seen, but the damage sure is.
Right, very quickly. And it happened in 2015, similar with the straight line winds. But very quickly, if you look outside today, it's a beautiful day like nothing ever happened.
What does that do from an emergency standpoint when you're trying to get the message out to people? How difficult is it to convince people this is serious, you have to stay home, get out of your car, etc., when 1 second everything looks fine and the next second your car's full of water?
It's very difficult, but fortunately, I think a lot of the alert systems work very well in this case. I know I was driving home from a meeting at 6:15 and my phone's going off, the radio's going off, and that's when it all started happening. And I think a lot of people were forewarned and therefore did the right thing, fortunately, and they took it seriously. I think 2015 shook everybody up in our county when the straight line winds hit, similar to a tornado, and had devastating damage as well. So I think people are more in tune to that, and anything the communications through the media, through our network systems at the emergency response seemed to be worked really well in this incident, and thankfully it saved a lot of lives.
And, the flooding is getting a lot of attention this morning just because it affected such a broad area. But as you mentioned, there were also several tornadoes that touched down as part of this storm. I know that you saw some tornado activity right near your area. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, there was, definitely touched down in a lot of different areas, as you could see on the film that you're showing now. And from what I saw today, a lot of houses. I mean, I don't even have a total number of it, but the houses that I've seen was probably upwards of 25 or 30. Some totally gone, some partially gone, some still with trees overhanging it, dangerous situations. But it was really devastating and very, very, very scary for the residents.
And I also want to bring in ABC News senior investigative reporter Aaron Katursky into this conversation. So, Aaron, we heard from officials in New York as well just a few minutes ago. What do you make of what you're seeing and hearing around New York and what you heard from the city and state leaders there?
Well, I think most importantly, Diane, we got an update from Mayor de Blasio saying that 9 people had been killed in New York City due to the historic flooding. Many of them had been found dead in their homes in Queens. We know of hundreds of rescues carried out by firefighters and police officers throughout the night, from pulling people out of submerged cars on the streets to pulling people out of inundated subway stations as the water just gushed into the subway stations. For some who experienced this, it was worse than Hurricane Sandy. And I was struck, too, by something that we heard from Governor Kathy Hochul, who said it wasn't just the coastal areas that were hit this time, but rather people who live away from the water in Staten Island and Queens and the Bronx and in Brooklyn, and whose streets were simply inundated. She said that she would be looking at that as a priority going forward. Drainage improvements, she said, would be something of a priority. And so days after Ida made landfall in southeastern Louisiana, it wreaks havoc on New York City and the subways, the commuter trains, getting around. It's very, very difficult today.
Chad, one of the things we also heard from New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio was that, quote, the projections keep failing us, essentially saying that they didn't get enough warning, or the warning they got was not sufficient or not accurate. But meteorologists are saying we did forecast this. We did warn about this. So where do you think the disconnect is?
I think, it's kind of hard when you're looking back on things, but I think what they were trying to say is that the amount of water per minute or per feet is overwhelming, and probably almost every system would fail in that case. And obviously when the water's falling at that rate, there's no way to do anything and just, deal with it at the aftermath. And I do agree that there's a lot of drainage issues in not only New Jersey and the county and New York and throughout the nation that needs to be addressed immediately. And, I keep hearing about the infrastructure money that's coming, which is great. It could address a lot of those concerns. And unfortunately, in these situations, you gotta react as best you can. And I'm not in New York to make any judgments on that, but that was my impression from listening to the news conference.
And Aaron, the New York leaders did take the opportunity, many of them, to talk about not only climate change, but the need to pass the infrastructure bill, several bills before Congress. So what is the latest on the status in terms of infrastructure efforts, both on the local and federal level?
Well, I think when people have just been impacted by something that officials believe could be improved by forthcoming legislation, it's certainly politically expedient to bring it up. And we heard at the very same briefing with the mayor and the governor, Congressman Gregory Meeks of Queens and Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, pushing their infrastructure package. But I have to say, listening to politicians talk about what improvements could be made after the fact is certainly encouraging. But in the immediate term, you still have warnings that don't expire for another couple of hours for people to stay away from flooded streets. The subways are still not fully functioning. Neither are the commuter lines out of the city into the northern and eastern suburbs. You still have a number of rescues that are taking place, and there's still no real tally other than the 9 dead of the full scope of what went on. So certainly it's politically expedient, but I think people are still in it and would be anxious for any improvements in drainage, in clearing storm drains, and in making sure that the water has somewhere to go. If that's going to be accomplished through an infrastructure bill, I'm sure people in the height of this storm would certainly support it. What happens in Washington, there's often a disconnect.
Chad, what's your message to people watching right now? How can they help?
I think the first thing is be a little patient as the crews get out there to do what they need to do. They are the experts and the professionals. There's down wires. Don't go near them. Even if you have no power in your neighborhood, you never know. Be a little patient. Report things to our emergency response center. We'll get on it immediately. And we're out there in the community, and that's why I like to take the opportunity in these unfortunate times to be out there and talk to the residents to reassure them, because that's what they need to hear, that someone's there, someone's listening to them, and just open up the line of communications. The more we can communicate and give updates, the better it is.
All right. Senior investigative reporter Aaron Katersky, Gloucester County Administrator Chad Brunner. We appreciate your time today, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. And
WPVI's Chad Pradelli has more from Center City, Philadelphia, right near the Vine Street Expressway. Hi, Chad.
We're here at 22nd and Vine, and just look at it. The water's seemingly going nowhere. You have trees, debris. You have to assume that is clogging drains below the water, making the receding of this very difficult. A major problem here. We're talking about the Schuylkill cresting at a record high, but a major problem and why we're seeing so much floodwater here on the Vine Street Expressway is because PennDOT officials tell me that a pumping station right here at 22nd and Vine failed. It broke. So it's not able to pump that water out of here underground and get it off the roadway. So officials now simply have to wait until this water recedes. When that will happen, officials can't tell me. We also don't know how far it goes down here when you go down the Vine Street Expressway, how far the floodwater goes, but we'll be keeping an eye on that. But, I got to tell you, officials want people, if you can't come into the city, do not. It is congested here. Roads are flooded everywhere. They want people to stay away. When we were coming down here, eastbound Schuylkill Expressway, it's shut down at Spring Garden. Traffic is getting off there in the Art Museum area and West Philadelphia. You can't go any further. PennDOT officials tell me over 60 roads, PennDOT roads, were closed in the 5-county region as of 9 a.m. Again, 76 shut down at Spring Garden. You also have to wonder, if you take a look over here to the left, you have the setup of Made in America. What's going to happen to that concert this weekend? That is creating problems as well. People aren't not going to be able to get down here. So you have to wonder what happens with that concert, making this cleanup, making traveling here in Center City much more difficult. I'm going to take you over here. You see people that are showing up all over the place to look at this flooding. And this is massive. How long have you been living here? What's your name?
My name's Sarah. I've been living here since the beginning of 2010, so about 11, going on 12 years now.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
Never. I mean, it always floods down near the art museum. You get stuff behind there, but to have it here at 676, I've never seen anything like this.
When you take a look out there, what are you thinking?
I drive on this road, and so it's crazy to think, it's totally impassable, and to know what it looks like normally, it's really, really bizarre.
I want to thank you so much for talking with us. Appreciate it. So, look at this. You know, when this is going to recede, no one can tell us right now. I mean, we haven't seen it move much. And the question is, has the Schuylkill crested, or is this going to continue to rise here in this area? Again, a major problem. A pumping station here at 22nd Vine failed. It broke. Water is not being able to be pumped out of here. So officials are simply going to wait, see what happens, see how quickly the water can get out of here. And I mean, look at all that debris. I mean, you're talking about trees, you're talking about leaves, you're talking about water bottles, other junk. They have to be clogging those drains underneath these floodwaters. Also, when this water finally gets out of here, then you have the other process of cleaning the roadway. Officials will have to check the road beds, make sure none of the road has been damaged. They'll have to have their tree contractors come in here, remove some of the trees. And you have to wonder about some of these overpasses, and those are a major concern for PennDOT. Once the flooding gets out of here, they'll have to check overpasses, they'll need to check bridges. So this is going to be a major cleanup and a lot of uncertainty surrounding it. We're hoping to learn more information. The Mayor Jim Kenney, is expected to hold a press conference here in about 15 minutes. We're expected to learn more about the state of the city, and we'll have, of course, more of that information on later editions of Action News. For now, Chad Prudelli, live along the Vine Street Expressway. Back to you guys.
All right, WPVI's Chad Prudelli. We appreciate it, Chad. Thank you. And we're also following the fallout after the Supreme Court overnight rejected a request to block a new Texas law banning abortions in the state as early as 6 weeks into pregnancy. 6 weeks is before many women know they're pregnant and before almost all abortions usually take place. The law also incentivizes individuals to file lawsuits against anyone who helps a woman obtain an illegal abortion, offering a monetary reward to plaintiffs who win. Rachel Scott has the latest from Austin.
Overnight, a bitterly divided Supreme Court breaking its silence and a 5-4 decision refusing to block a new Texas law that bans nearly all abortions in the state. Chief Justice John Roberts breaking from the conservative majority on the bench, joining the liberal justices in dissenting the move, calling the Texas law not only unusual, but unprecedented. Across the state, protesters called on the high court to step in and stop the ban. But in an unsigned opinion, the conservative majority said the abortion providers who challenged the law did not address complex and novel procedural questions. And so as of today in Texas, the law stands. A physician may not perform an abortion if a fetal heartbeat is detected, which could be as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy and before some women even know they are pregnant. And there are no exceptions for rape or incest, only for medical emergencies. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, writing in her dissent, the court order is stunning. Writing presented with a flagrantly unconstitutional law engineered to prohibit women from exercising their constitutional rights, a majority of justices have opted to bury their heads in the sand.
Our thanks to Rachel Scott for that report. And let's go to senior Washington reporter DevinDwyer for more on this Supreme Court decision. Devin, what kind of a real impact is this ban having in its first days, and how are people there in Texas reacting to it?
A very significant impact, Diane, as you can imagine. Across the state of Texas this morning, 90% of abortions that would have been performed just a few days ago are not happening. Only about 10% of what the clinics in that state typically provide before 6 weeks, about 6 weeks of pregnancy, are going forward. I talked to a number of clinics yesterday. Whole Women's Health operates 4 clinics, Planned Parenthood about 24 women's health centers across the state of Texas. They're open for business. They are seeing patients. Physicians are there. They're offering guidance, ultrasounds. But at this point, Diane, most women in the state of Texas who need abortion services cannot get them. So the second most populous state in the country, as Rachel reported there, abortion is all but banned. Diane?
And the Supreme Court's unsigned order, it says that this is, quote, not based on any conclusion about constitutionality of the law. This decision really hinged on the way this law is enforced. It depends on citizens to enforce the law rather than the state enforcing the law. Why was that so important here?
Yeah, take a step back just for a second. What was actually before the Supreme Court here was a request for an injunction to temporarily block Texas's law from taking effect. So they weren't looking at the merits of the case. They weren't asked to weigh both sides. They didn't hear arguments. They didn't even hear an appeal. They were simply asked for a temporary injunction. And what the abortion providers in Texas, Diane, asked for was an injunction against the state attorney general, state courts, other officials in Texas. And what the 5 conservatives said last night, conservative justices in the Supreme Court, is they said basically on procedural grounds, this whole request for an injunction is misguided. And that is because, as you mentioned, state officials in Texas don't enforce this law. It's everyday citizens. And so the conservative majority said there's sort of a problem here with this request. It doesn't really work. And by the way, there's no precedent for us to enjoin an entire state court system. We don't do that in the federal government. And so that was their argument in why they declined to issue a temporary ban. Now, that said, the legal case here on the merits is moving forward. It's happening in the Fifth Circuit. It just will take some time. And during that time period, weeks, months, abortion will effectively remain banned in that state, Diane.
Now, could someone else request another injunction based on different terms?
Yes, exactly. And that's what advocates for these abortion providers are talking about. They're evaluating their options. The lead attorney in this case told me yesterday they are not giving up. They're going to fight this in court. But as you know, these court battles take time. There's a lot of legal process. There's hearings, there's briefings, there's filings, all those sorts of things. So this won't be a quick fix, but the fight does continue. So it's not over in Texas. And I would not be surprised if at the end of the day, if this does reach the merits, that a court would pretty easily put this law on hold. It's just what sort of vehicle, will get to the court that will do that. And this is, as we've been talking about the past couple of days, Diane, this is exactly what those Texas legislators wanted to do. This was why they designed the law this way. And we are finding out that it was successful, the first of its kind in the country.
And critics of the Supreme Court decision are pointing to that, the fact that this is exactly why they worded the law that way. This is why the law is enforced that way. They were trying to get around any federal intervention in the law, and clearly that worked. President Biden even weighed in, saying, quote, complete strangers will now be empowered to inject themselves in the most private and personal health decisions faced by women, again, because they are relying on private citizens to sue and to enforce this law rather than it being enforced by the state. So I wonder, could this law and the fact that it was successful in the Supreme Court in terms of defeating this injunction, could this set a precedent when it comes to writing future laws that are controversial along these lines and kind of permitting or even asking private citizens to police each other?
Well, that's the fear among abortion advocates in a number of states, that now Texas has provided a blueprint for other states to enact laws that can basically withstand judicial scrutiny. But there's also a concern, Diane, that this type of law, pitting citizen against citizen, a very cynical approach to enforcement, could apply to any number of controversial topics, religious freedom, First Amendment issues. And that's why Chief Justice John Roberts, one of the conservative members who dissented, the only conservative to dissent overnight, Diane, wrote that this law is unusual, unprecedented, and because of the unprecedented consequences, we need to take caution. We need to pause, even if there's not precedent for it, even if this is very unusual, even if the way Texas has designed it is quite tricky and novel. The Chief Justice overnight said there is good reason here to put this on hold because of some of the things that you're alluding to, and that is the fallout of this type of law around the country. We simply don't operate this way as a people. Laws are enforced by officials, by state agencies, and by law enforcement, not by everyday people, neighbors, family, and friends. And that's what this case has set up in Texas.
All right, DevinDwyer, always great to have your analysis, Devin. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
And we're now awaiting remarks from President Biden on the deadly flooding shortly from the remnants of Hurricane Ida. We'll bring that to you live when it happens. In the meantime, we will have continuing updates right here on ABC News Live throughout the day. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Diane Macedo. Stay safe out there.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.